Welcome to Tales from College Football. This season I'll be pondering college football what-ifs, where we'll take glimpses into alternate realities and explore how the world of college football might have unfolded differently. I'm your host, Brandon Peterson. In 1896, the landscape of college football was very different from today's powerhouse conferences, massive stadiums, and billion-dollar TV deals. The Western Conference, what we now know as the Big Ten, was just forming, and the schools were aligning themselves to become some of the most legendary programs in the sport. But in this episode's alternate history, something monumental happens. In 1896, Notre Dame doesn't decide to go it alone as an independent. Instead, they join the Western Conference, establishing themselves as a Big Ten member from the very beginning. So what would that mean for college football? How would the sport look today if Notre Dame had built its legacy through the Big Ten rather than as an independent? The founding members of the Western Conference were a collection of pioneering programs. This included the University of Chicago, Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, Northwestern, Purdue, and Wisconsin. Notre Dame's entry into the Big Ten puts them on a collision course with Michigan. The two programs have long been considered blue bloods of college football, and with Notre Dame now in the same conference, the rivalry would have ignited much earlier than in reality. Michigan, with the legendary point-a-minute team in 1901, it would face a determined and disciplined Notre Dame program led by Coach Pat O'Day. Imagine those early matchups between Michigan's high-scoring offense that they were known for and Notre Dame's defense. Michigan's teams, they were known for that explosive scoring, but Notre Dame could have been the perfect kryptonite to slow them down with a solid, hard-hitting defense. Every year, their class should be one of the biggest games in the conference and in college football. There'd be some serious coaching star power here as well in the conference that would feature coaches like Fielding Yost, Newt Rockne, and Amos Alonzo Stagg. Speaking of Coach Stagg, let's not forget about the University of Chicago. The Maroons, while not as well known in today's football landscape, were a powerful force in the early years. With Notre Dame in the Big Ten, Chicago would have found a new rival. The Maroons could have built a strong, heated rivalry with Notre Dame, competing for supremacy in the conference and further cementing their place in college football lore. Chicago would have possibly been more motivated to keep their successful sport alive through the years, instead of sacrificing it and dropping football in favor of better academics. Conference-affiliated Notre Dame would have played regional games instead of traveling around the country as they did with their independent schedule. Early on, this shift could have had a profound impact on their brand, keeping them closer to home and cultivating fierce rivalries with nearby teams like Michigan, Purdue, Chicago, and Northwestern. And how great would those matchups have been against Minnesota when the Gophers were so dominant early on? Instead of being known as the Ramblers, a team that traveled widely in search of competition, Notre Dame could have been viewed as a staple of the Midwest football scene with a more focused regional identity. It would be interesting to see Notre Dame with more of a regional brand than a national following. Now, let's consider the broader implications of Notre Dame in the Big Ten when it comes to postseason play and national championships. With Notre Dame's addition, the Big Ten would have likely become the premier conference much earlier. In the Rose Bowl, traditionally a Big Ten versus Pac-10 matchup, could have turned into a recurring showdown between the best of the Big Ten, Michigan, Notre Dame, and Chicago, and Minnesota, and the likes of USC, Stanford, and Cal. Imagine the prestige of a Rose Bowl that would feature Notre Dame versus USC in those early years. Such a game would have had national significance from the get-go. Instead of a regular season rivalry, there would be much more at stake. And with the growing prominence of Notre Dame in the conference, the Big Ten would have laid claim to having the most nationally relevant programs. The championship races would have been more competitive, and with Notre Dame's big game pedigree, the Irish in their conference would have laid claim to more early national titles in an era where they were much more subjective. You might be wondering why I haven't talked about Ohio State yet. In this alternate reality, with Michigan focusing their attention on a conference with Notre Dame, Ohio State decides to stay independent. While they have access to strong recruiting grounds in Ohio and continuing to schedule tough national matchups, they wouldn't have the same stability that they would have as being in the Big Ten Conference. They'd probably struggle to gain access to major prestigious bowls. While the Buckeyes would still be relevant, they would probably not rise to the same heights of national prominence as it would be in our timeline without the benefits of the Big Ten affiliation. This would impact two legendary coaching careers, Woody Hayes and Bo Schembechler. The iconic rivalry between Ohio State and Michigan, known for the intense coaching personalities of Hayes and Schembechler, it never would have existed. If Notre Dame had been in the Big Ten, Schembechler would have still left as Hayes' assistant from Ohio State to go on and coach the Wolverines, but it probably would have been with Hayes' blessing. The animosity, the legendary tension, and the fight for the Big Ten bragging rights would not have been as charged. We wouldn't have the fierce nature of the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry with both coaches vying for conference dominance. They wouldn't be on each other's schedule each year, and without that historical context, Hayes and Schembechler would have not been enemies, and the college football world would have lost one of the most intense coaching rivalries in history. With the help from a conference, Notre Dame may have not found themselves with financial problems during World War II, prompting a popular, successful Navy team to schedule them, and Notre Dame agreeing to return the favor by playing them each year. Notre Dame's early integration into the Big Ten would have transformed college football, forging intense rivalries with Michigan, Minnesota, and Chicago, elevating the conference's prestige, and reshaping postseason traditions like the Rose Bowl. While the Irish might have gained an even stronger regional identity, the iconic independent brand of Notre Dame and legendary rivalries like Ohio State and Michigan never would have happened. This alternate history highlights how one team's sense of belonging could have profoundly changed the trajectory of college football's rivalries, traditions, and national legacy. Thanks for listening to Tales from College Football with your host, Brandon Peterson. Tune in every other week as new what-ifs will be discussed from our favorite sport. Be sure to reach out and share your thoughts and ideas with me on X, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and TikTok at CodePeterson. You can also check out my website, CodePeterson.com.